Hello and welcome back to the 6th round post-fight show with me, Zane Simon. I am joined once again this week by Dayne Fox. Dayne, thank you for joining me once again to talk about this UFC card that just went down in Mexico City. Jeremy Stephens getting eye-poked in 15 seconds by Yair Rodriguez in the main event to wrap things up nice and early on an otherwise kind of odd night of fights.
Yeah, there were some positive moments for the card, but clearly the main event is usually what cards are remembered for, and it's hard to think of a more disappointing way for the card to close out.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those things where, you know, the fans of Mexico City throwing trash into the cage, like, partially they're doing that because they didn't get the main event, but they're not doing that if they just got to see an amazing well, maybe they are, but fans all over are terrible. Nothing to do with any one place or whatever, but if they got to see an awesome card all the way through, they're probably not feeling cheated out of a main event or quite so cheated out of a main event.
Yeah.
Instead, this is, unfortunately, these fight night cards, the way the UFC books them, they're booking them entirely to stand on the quality of that last fight.
No, and there is a lot of truth to that. I question how much of it can be blamed on the UFC because I know that there's a lot of fighters who are reluctant to fight at high elevation. And Mexico City's, they reported that it was sitting at about 7,500 feet where they were fighting. So I think that they probably just have a hard time getting people who aren't of Mexican descent wanting to fight there anyway. So while it is true that, it's problematic that it's a one-fight card for the most part, I don't know how much of the blame could necessarily go to the UFC for that.
Well, I would give them a lot more leeway on that if most of their fight night cards these days didn't look pretty similar.
I'll give you that.
So, it's definitely one of the things where individually, yes, you could say maybe mitigating circumstances here, especially depleted this one, but, the Cowboy Gagey card last week was very much a Cowboy Gagey fight night. The Andrade Zhang card was all about that title fight in the main event. Mm-hmm. This is the way these things go. And when that main event doesn't pay off, we get a night that was ruled by a lot of decisions. And not necessarily bad fights for decisions, but just kind of an overall... all the action gets a little swamped when there aren't a lot of big, memorable, flashy moments.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think, let's see here. How many decisions were there on the card? There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, yeah, 7 out of 12 fights ended in decision. Yeah. So, yeah. And what's even worse is that heading into the main event, we had 3 of them in a row. And I'm not necessarily going to complain with the quality of those fights. I thought those last 3 fights were solid. Not great, but they were solid.
Yeah.
But it does kind of get tepid when you don't get those big wow moments.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where if that main event had really paid off, we would forget all about that. Be like, oh yeah, no, Moreno Askarov was a ton of fun. Esparza Grasso was decent and solid. Aldana Melo was at least, was a high pace all the way through. And then we got that awesome Yair Rodriguez, Jeremy Stephens fight to cap it all off. But we didn't get that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the main event, to liken it to a meal, it's the main course. It's the steak. You're talking about the steak. Nobody really cares so much about the corn and the potatoes. It's the main dish that people want to talk about.
Yeah. So, yeah, on that note, I guess the UFC probably rebooks this fight. It was a fun fight. On paper, Yair Rodriguez immediately came out and was just like, I'd like to do it over. We should do this all again. But Man, Jeremy Stephens has got to be feeling miserable right now.
Yeah. No, and he's got a reputation as one of the toughest SOBs on the roster. Nobody is ever going to question his toughness, and the fact that he was unable to open his eye, it sounds like that there could have been some pretty serious damage done there. I mean, yeah, it's kind of ironic that Bisping was the one calling this fight, because if there's anybody that can talk about what eye pokes can do to your career, it's Bisping.
No kidding. I kept thinking about that. I was like, dude, I mean, you fought the last few years of your career with only one eye working, really. But maybe then that's his point, too. Fighters, they don't have a lot of pity if they feel like in that situation they would have just fought with one eye. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Either way, I mean, I think the big thing is really honestly just that whether the injury was bad or not, the poke clearly just froze up a reflex action in his face. Yeah. And, I think a lot of us have been there at some point in our lives where you get hit or you get something in your eye, or, you get a poke in the eye and you feel like you just can't open your eye at all.
Yeah. And even when you're forcing it open, it's doing everything that it possibly can to shut itself right back. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be like maybe he doesn't. Maybe in an hour he's just going to be like, yeah, it's not even scratched or anything. But if it takes an hour to be able to open it easily, then you can't fight the whole night with one eye. Mm-hmm. So rough loss for fans. Rough way to get a no contest for Yair and Stephens, but maybe we'll get to see it. It'd be a great, if the result is that this fills out a pay-per-view main card sometime in the near future, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that I was wondering is if they rebook it, if they try to redo it in Mexico City, I have my questions whether or not that they would want to try to do that again, but
I can't see them. I don't think they're ever going to go back to Mexico City or Mexico often enough that they could hold it all the way until their next time down.
Yeah, and that was my thoughts as well. But, I mean, clearly, based on the fan reaction, it looks like Rodriguez does have quite a bit of star power in Mexico City. So I can see them wanting him to be there as often as possible, even to the point where if it means not rebooking this contest, I doubt that it plays out that way, but I think they're going to do everything they can to keep him a mainstay in Mexico.
Sure, it's just, he's ready to go. He's going to be ready to go right away. So if Stephens, if his eye isn't badly injured, if it's just a bruise or if it's just, something that's going to go away quickly, like both these guys are in fight shape, they could rebook this fight for 3 weeks from now,
Yeah, absolutely.
In the co-main, Carla Esparza beat Alexa Grasso by majority decision. 1 card, which I agreed with, called it a draw. 2 cards for Carla Esparza. I'm not, I don't think the argument. This is such a weird thing because, I feel like I'm fine with Carla Esparza winning, and I'm fine with the draw, but I can see why everybody was so mad about it, just because it really should have been a very easy draw to score in my book.
I totally agree with you on that one. I mean, I'm not going to go so far as to call it a robbery. There are close contests that can go either way, and even if somebody had scored it in Grasso's favor, I wouldn't necessarily call that a robbery. But that final round was so pivotal, on whether you scored it a 10-9 or a 10-8 for Grasso. And the way that I tried to explain it on Twitter was not only did Grasso rock Esparza, but she put her into that arm bar that Esparza had to, from what it appeared to me, she dislocated her elbow in order to escape from it. And Esparza had very minimal offense in return. And, if we're scoring by damage, a dislocated joint sounds like some pretty severe damage in my book. So I thought that it was a pretty clear 10-8 in my mind for Grasso.
Yeah. Especially just reflecting on the 10-9 rounds before. You just can't look at them side by side and say, oh, yes, these are the same 2 things.
Absolutely.
Round true. 2 of Esparza Grasso is clearly just like round 3 of Esparza Grasso in terms of severity of damage done and momentum of the fight.
Yeah, no, there's no comparing what Esparza did in those first 2 rounds to what Grasso did to her in that last round. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's not a robbery, and kudos to both fighters, to be brutally honest. Esparza toughed out that round. I don't think anybody has any right to call her a pansy or anything like that at this point. She proved her mettle there. And for Grasso to come back the way she did and dominate that final round showed a lot of grit on her part too.
Yeah, and if Grasso wants to point a finger about the way the fight was judged or anything like that, or Grasso fans want to point a finger about the way the fight was judged, like, you can't spend that much time fighting off your back and expect to get decisions.
Yeah, she didn't arbitrarily start out in a hole. She dug that hole herself in those first 2 rounds.
Yeah. You can argue she did more damage off her back. You can argue that she was more aggressive off her back, anything you want. But you can't. She knows, she's a pro fighter. She's been in there a bunch. She knows that you can't just hang out on your back and expect the judges to give you that decision in a fight.
Yeah, and I think she knows. Her reaction when the scorecards were announced, she had a knowing smile that just kind of said, "Yeah, shit, I can see that coming."
Yeah, I don't know. She seemed so like, I thought she was just like so in the moment of believing she won, and then just way too nice a person to complain about it.
That's true. That's true. She does come across as a sweetheart, so maybe that's the case. But fans are usually a lot more brutal about that kind of stuff, and so I think she's going to have a lot of backers on the internet saying that was BS. But
yeah, at least for her as a fighter, a lot of fighters, being able to keep your confidence and being able to feel like you've never lost a fight clean is a big important part for fighters. Mm-hmm. That's why you always hear them talk about every fight was like, oh yeah, well, I didn't really lose that fight, or I was sick going into that fight, I had a bad camp, all the excuses, all that. You have to feel like you can win every single time. That's the way the game goes. This is definitely a fight she's going to be able to shrug off and be like, look, I won that fight. Everybody knows I won that fight. I may not have gotten paid like I won it, but I will argue to my death that I should have gotten that win. Yeah, no,
she's walking out of this event looking better than Esparza is, even if Esparza walked out with the W.
Yeah. Still, for Esparza, it keeps her right in that position as a very strong gatekeeper to the very elite of the division. She's somebody you got to go out and prove you can really take it to her, or you're not going to climb.
Yep. Where do you see them going with her next?
I kind of think they're going to keep feeding her in that position and give her a fight with Moreno Rodriguez, who beat Tisha Torres recently.
Yep, that's exactly who I was thinking as well. Good call.
Yeah. It seems like it makes a lot of sense for Esparza. She wins that. She's suddenly on a 3-fight win streak again, and she can, once again, like her bout against Claudia Gadelha and Tatiana Suarez, she can start claiming that she should be getting a top 5 title contender kind of fight.
Yeah.
Once more. She might not win it, but put together 3 wins in that division, and she's got that claim. And for Rodriguez, obviously, going back-to-back and beating Tisha Torres and Carla Esparza would be a great way for her to build a resume that says that she's a future title contender.
Yeah, because she's a sleeper at this point. I mean, that win over Torres was impressive, but you still don't hear a lot of rumbling about her.
Yeah, it's because a lot of fans have been always kind of down on Torres for reasons that I'm never quite sure of. In the same way they're kind of down on Esparza. It's one of those things that even as very talented athletes, they don't tend to bring about a lot of vocal support. So beating them doesn't gain a lot of hype. But yeah, Moreno Rodriguez, I've definitely underestimated her, and she could walk out of that with a win and be looking like an easy future contender for a belt, especially considering that it's currently around Weili Zhang's waist, and that kind of makes that whole division open as possible contenders. Oh
yeah. No, that division is so much fun for me to keep an eye on right now. There's just so many different ways that this could go. So yeah.
before that, Brandon Moreno drew against Askarov. I also cannot honestly I cannot really fathom scoring Esparza Grasso anything other than a draw. I cannot fathom scoring this fight a draw. That 28-20, like the 28-29 scorecard for Askarov, I can kind of see. The first 2 rounds were very back and forth, very close. Askarov had a lot more control positions, had some guard passes and things like that.
Yep.
But Moreno hurt him in each of those rounds badly.
Yeah.
So I can see how you give Askarov those 2 and Moreno the third. I scored at 30-27 Moreno. I thought he won every round, and I thought I thought his power won out. I cannot understand giving Moreno a 10-8 round in the third. Like, that just boggles my mind.
I was with you on that. I scored at 29-28 for Moreno. I thought that Askarov barely edged out the first round, but like you, I can see the first 2 rounds going either way. But there's absolutely no doubt that Moreno took the final round. But taking it to the extent that it was a 10-8, I disagreed with that. But
what can I do? You look at these fights back to back here, and in round 3 of Esparza Grasso landed 22 strikes with a deep sub attempt to Esparza's 35-23 total. And in that Moreno Askarov round 3, 5 strikes from Askarov to 9 from Moreno. 36-15 total strikes, non-significant strikes, no sub attempts, 1 pass. That's it.
Yeah,
and it's just
there was even a reversal from Askarov.
And even a reversal from Askarov. Like, I don't care how much control you have. If all you have is control, and that's what that tells me is pretty much all Moreno had is control, you should never be getting a 10-8 round.
Yeah.
Unless it's really, really absolute masterful grappling control. And what Moreno had wasn't really that.
No, and none of the shots that he landed were especially debilitating towards Askarov to he landed some good shots, but there was nothing that had me thinking, oh yeah, Askarov's on his way to going out. But that's why I completely agree with you. I didn't see a 10-8 round there. I didn't see it being close to a 10-8 round, but I don't know, somebody in the judges' seat like Moreno.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing because I can split, both of those cards, I can split them either way, or I can see calling them in multiple ways, but It's just the way that it ended up, it just feels so wrong somehow.
Yeah. And that's what I told my wife. I told her that I could see it going anywhere from 30-27 Moreno to 29-28 Askarov, but the draw was kind of funky, but whatever, again, it doesn't necessarily feel like a robbery. It just feels more or less like a curiosity. Yeah,
it was a good, fun fight. Both
Absolutely.
Guys had their moments. They were wild and fun. Moreno showed up. He honestly, that's one of the best Brandon Moreno performances I've ever seen him have, where he just looked like he could, obviously coming back and hitting that head kick to technical submission on Dustin Ortiz was the great highlight of his career to date. But this was a Moreno who was just in a constant scrambling fight and never looked like he was overwhelmed or broken or didn't know exactly what he wanted to do at every moment. And every time he was on the feet, he was landing shots. He was landing with power. He was being aggressive. And that's just a better Brandon Moreno than I've seen for a long time.
Yeah, no, it was easily the most complete performance of his career, because Askarov's he's not a can. Askarov was unbeaten coming into this, and he had beaten some notable names too. He did put Moreno in some bad positions, but Moreno fought out of them, and like you said, he never seemed like he was overwhelmed or just on his way to being dominated. Moreno's previous UFC wins, like you said, he was being dominated by Ortiz up to that point. squeaked by Ryan Benoit or Benoit. I don't know how
Benoit. He's from Texas. It's so we don't try to figure it out.
And then the Luis Smolka fight. I know that one ended in the first round, but Smolka was winning up to the point where he got submitted.
Yeah. So it's very much like this to me felt like, and especially because those Sergio Pettis and Alexandra Pantoja fights were both very much just Moreno just kind of getting walloped all the way through.
Exactly.
So this was very much one of the few times I've seen him like start out on a bad foot or like have an opponent who could really take momentum over, and Moreno never relinquishing enough of that momentum to make the fight easy on Askarov.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you like the idea of Moreno and Cara France moving forward?
Yeah. I think that's got to be the fight you make.
Yeah. The only other one I was thinking was Bontaron, but I think Cara France has a better track record. So
I just think that Moreno Cara France is just a more fun fight.
Oh, totally.
Bontarin he's good. I got nothing against him, but Moreno feels like a much more right fight for me somehow. Yep. I think partially just because Cara France is so much. He's kind of like Moreno. It never quite feels like he's in control of a fight, even in the way he should be, even when he's winning it. I don't know. It feels like a fight that could have a lot of momentum swings. All right, that brings us to a catchweight bout. Irene Aldana, Vanessa Melo, at 140 pounds, supposed to be a bantamweight fight. Melo came in heavy. And if we want to talk consistent, clean, top performances of somebody's career, this is easily the most comfortable Irene Aldana has ever looked striking. The commentary booth kept talking to her like, oh, she's such a sharp striker. She puts everything together so well. And this is really, she did good to make them to stand behind those words, because if this was her Betch Correia fight or her even her Raquel Pennington fight, like that's not really a claim that necessarily stands up under pressure. No.
While I agree with the fact that she did look really good here, she was attacking all areas on Melo. And just was in complete control the entire fight. Before we all start claiming that she's ready to take on the top of the division, let's again look and see who it is that she was beating.
No, I'm not saying that this was like, this really says everything, but it says something for a fighter who, like I say, when your past opponents are Betch Correia and Raquel Pennington, they're both much cleverer, more diverse fighters than Melo, but they're not like way, way, way better athletes.
And Correia is probably a worse athlete, but
yeah. And even with even if you go back all the way to
Pudilova,
Lucy Pudilova or Talita Bernardo, like. None of these fighters in here are fantastic athletes, or are nearly as good an athlete as Aldana.
Mm-hmm.
But they've all been able to force much more difficult fights out of her than they should. And so it says something, I think, for her and for her confidence that this finally felt like a Irene Aldana fight where she had an opponent in front of her that she's just more athletic than, and she just fought a better fight all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, and she's progressing. I mean, even up to the point where her 3-fight winning streak was snapped, you could see that she was getting more comfortable in there. But I think, like you said, the fact that she didn't necessarily have a point where it looked like she was losing control of the fight is a lot of proof of that growth.
Yeah, it's definitely for her. It's all about composure. It's all about the ability to sit down. And, when she's firing those combinations, go into the body hard like that, and Melo's still countering her and hitting her with occasional shots, but Aldana's not just trying to like back off and reset and trying to get comfortable and find her footing and her range all over again. She was just much more willing to stay in and keep whatever range she had and just be confident she could keep landing the better shots.
Yeah.
So.
And I didn't hate what I saw out of Melo either. Like,
No.
she looks like she's a limited athlete, but she ate a lot of strikes from Aldana, but she kept coming forward, kept going for it. And like we've talked about before, if in this division, if you're tough, durable, and willing to keep coming forth, you can win some fights.
Well, and she's also a trigger counter fighter. Every single time Aldana threw at her, she would throw right back.
Yep.
Against smaller, less athletic fighters, less fast fighters who don't have as good a controller or who can't make that range that Aldana did, like that could carry her a ways in that division, you know?
Absolutely.
That brings us to a featherweight bout. Opened the main card. Steven Peterson, Martín Bravo.
Woo.
And this was a war. This was a fun, just two guys whose only setting is throw tons of volume and go forward at all times.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I feel for Bravo a little here because I think he just must have looked at tape on Steven Peterson and seen how willing Peterson is to eat shots and come forward and be aggressive and kind of fight the same fight that Bravo likes to fight.
Yep.
And thought, the way I got to beat this guy is to just turn it up even higher.
Turn it to 11.
And he could not fight at 11 for nearly long enough at that altitude. Like, I think he honestly just kind of broke himself out of this fight.
Yeah. And like you said, I felt bad for him too because he looked better than he has previously before. Like, he was giving it to Peterson hardcore in that first round, and Peterson looked sluggish. And the broadcast had talked about how he had a tough weight cut. So I was thinking, oh, good hell, he's on his way out at this point. But shit, that spinning, that it was hell. It wasn't just a spinning back fist; it was a counter spinning back fist because Bravo threw one first.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
That one's up there with knockout of the year contenders. Whew.
Yep, I mean, he could see Bravo slowing down. You could see every time he started to throw, Peterson was actually dodging and then countering.
Yep.
Right as the first round ended, start of the second starts right on the same pace, and I love that there was actually just an inkling of that exchange and how exactly it would go down and how the dynamic had shifted. Mm-hmm. When in the first round, you get Martín Bravo throwing the spinning back kick that lands perfectly on Peterson, and Peterson immediately tries to throw one back and just fails miserably.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the dynamic of Bravo pushing this insane pace. He threw 159 significant strikes in the first round.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
And by the time he's done with that, he tries something spinning, and he's the one that looks slow and out of sync. And Peterson, just like that first time, immediately counters with the same move, and now he's the one with energy and sharper, and it just crushed him.
Yeah.
Pretty stuff.
Brutal stuff.
Yeah.
It looked like it took Bravo a little while to come around, too. I mean, the force that Peterson hit him with, wow.
Yeah, it was absolutely just knocked him way out cold immediately. He got a follow-up hammer fist for his trouble, but it won Steven Peterson performance of the night alongside Paul Craig, who we'll get to in a minute. Carla Esparza and Alexa Grasso getting a fight of the night, so some good bonuses going down the card to fighters that could use the money, you know?
Yeah, no, totally well-deserved. As soon as Peterson scored that knockout, I knew he was getting it. And, yeah, I'm not going to say Esparza and Grasso don't deserve it. They absolutely do, so well-deserved. And in the process, it looked like Peterson wasn't going to be anything more than a footnote. Now he's going to have a highlight reel that'll play on the UFC for a long time to come.
Yeah, and he's an action fighter. Even if he's a guy who's doesn't have a ton of technique anywhere, he's super tough and he's always willing to lay everything out there. So as long as he's willing, especially to take fights in hard, in difficult cards, go fight in people's hometowns, take fights on short notice and all that, he could be the kind of guy who wins maybe 1 in every 3 bouts, and the UFC still keeps giving him more fights and more opportunities just because they like having him on cards.
Oh, yeah. No, he's the type of guy that if you can squeeze a fun fight out of a person, he's the type of person who will squeeze it out of them.
Yeah. So all credit to him there. Closing out the prelims, just before that, all on ESPN Plus, Jose Alberto Quinones beat Carlos Huachin, and this was just an outclassing, plain and simple. And this is, man, I try to tell myself this over and over, and I always fail to. I always fail to remember, take my own advice, because it's always, whenever you get a fighter like this or you get a performance like Huachin had in his debut, you always want to be like you really want to give them credit for that.
Yeah.
But you can't give fighters, you can't bank on a fighter coming back with a win after a loss just because they took a step back in competition. And for Huachin, he showed up great against Hani Barcelos, who I think is honestly literally a top 15 in the world kind of fighter. But Quinones was big and rangy, tall, and he didn't even have a huge reach advantage, but enough of one that Huachin just had no clue how to deal with it or how to get by it, and had to overextend, got himself set up for really easy takedowns, and it was just, Quinones looked an easy whole level above him all fight.
Yeah. At this point, it's been 5 years since Quinones came off of tough Latin America, so you can't necessarily call him a prospect anymore. But he's proven himself to be a tough and durable test at bantamweight.
Yep.
And he always comes in well prepared. I believe that he's still working with AKA. I could be wrong on that. But, he's well coached. He comes out and he usually fights discipline. Now, he's not the most talented athlete or anything like that, but he's going to outwork somebody as green as Huachin every time, because Huachin still has a long way to go as far as turning that greenness into experience.
Yeah, he actually, I think he's with Alliance mostly.
Quinones is?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good camp too.
Yeah. But, for Huachin, I mean, he's got some good, tight power boxing in the pocket, but you could see, too, like his corner was telling him to hit the body, and when he did, he was really successful. Mm-hmm. But you could look at his eyes, and you could see what he's trying to do, and all he wanted to do was just headhunt with big power hooks. And again, somebody who's taller and faster than you on the feet, at least with just his foot speed, you're not going to find somebody all that easily just swinging big power hooks at their head.
Yep.
So tough loss for Huachin, kind of thing that may see an a quick end to his UFC career if he can't figure out how to round out his game to be a little more diverse and a little more complete.
Well, he'd be better off. He'd be better off being cut from the UFC at this point anyway. I mean, if he were to get some experience on the regional scene, I think that he could possibly make his way back better prepared than he did for this run.
Yeah. I'm just getting a note here from our producer that apparently, just to back up the idea that this was a good decision to stop this fight, Jeremy Stephens still can't open his eye. So he's being sent to an emergency eye doctor to look at it and see if they can't figure out how to recover it.
Holy crap, that's not a good sign.
Recovered, yeah. Like I said, I mean, it could just be a really strong reflex action still, but there's no way he could have fought through that. You can't. No. You can't look at that, here we are 30 minutes later and be like, oh, I bet Jeremy Stephens could have kept going if he'd actually wanted to.
Crazy. Ugh.
Further down the card, featherweight bout, Kyle Nelson absolutely blew the doors off Polo Reyes.
Yeah.
And Reyes had to feel like he was getting exactly the fight he wanted, too, because Nelson didn't really go out there charging in and looking for takedowns and all that. willing to stand and trade, willing to throw hooks, willing to just trade some power shots like Reyes wants, but got him against the cage, and that clinch elbow was just absolutely vicious.
Oh yeah, and then those follow-up punches. I was amazed that Reyes was still standing. I mean,
it's just that his legs probably locked up. You know, like you see people get KO'd and their legs just lock.
Mm-hmm.
I got to think his legs just locked up, and that was the only thing kept him standing.
Yeah, because that was brutal. I mean, all due respect to Paul Craig, but I probably would have given that bonus to Nelson because that was vicious.
Yeah, whew. I agree. That was a hell of a KO. Vicious work from Nelson. Reyes tried to argue the stoppage a little bit. He came to pretty quickly after the ref stepped in, but he was out when the ref stepped in.
That was a great stoppage. The only person arguing that was Reyes himself, and he had been knocked silly, so no.
Yeah. Great work from Nelson. He absolutely had to get the win. He started out 0-2 in his first two UFC fights after taking a short notice bout with Carlos Diego Ferreira at lightweight and then dropping down to featherweight for his second bout and losing a close one to Matt Sales. But this was a good showing for. This is more like the Kyle Nelson that I remember watching on the regionals. Just a guy who is a fast starter and a vicious power puncher and power wrestler early in fights.
Yeah, no, I blew this one. I picked Reyes because I was thinking that so long as he could get out of the first round and drag Nelson into deep waters, that Nelson's gas tank would cause some problems. I mean, they were fighting in elevation as well. That was another thing that I was thinking, but Nelson was like, "No, we ain't leaving this first round." So
Nelson, I mean, it's not a dumb pick. I've seen Nelson in those same fights earlier in his career and against Sales and against Ferreira. It's always if he doesn't get that, if that great first round from him does not turn into a win immediately, he tends to fade hard. So, not a terrible pick, but Reyes has also got it up early in fights a lot.
Yeah, and Reyes looks shop-worn at this point. Yeah. Like, he's not lasting very long. I mean, it makes me kind of think about his epic brawl that he had with Dong Hyung Ma about 3 years ago. And it's like, well, when I think about it, Ma's not necessarily a heavy hitter, so maybe Reyes never had that great of a chin. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he got TKO'd at least once early in his career. So it's not like it's not like his lack of durability is just an all of a sudden thing.
Yeah.
But it's also worth noting too, though, that Reyes, that fight against Dong Hyung Ma, he ate a lot of shots. He ate a ton of shots in that fight, and that can be the kind of fight too that just kind of takes years off you.
Yeah, no, that's type of that type of fight that will it adds up, and those are the types of fights that he loves. So.
Before that, Angela Hill beat Ariane Carnelossi, and a great fight from Hill. I mean, she had a newcomer. She had somebody who didn't have her experience, who didn't have her depth, her technical depth. So it was definitely a fight she should show up and look great in. But Hill's had kind of a history of fighting down to the level of her competition. So my expectations were not that high for Hill, and she actually did a really good job staying composed and fighting off Carnelossi's pressure all throughout the bout.
Yeah, and I expected her to fade harder than what she did. I mean, she did slow down after a very strong first round, but it wasn't in the way that we've seen her fade, like, say, against Amanda Nunes' girlfriend. Nina Askarov.
Nina Askarov, yeah.
Yeah, like when she fought against her, she faded hard. And so I was thinking that was a very distinct possibility up in Mexico City that she would do the same thing here. But the drop-off was minimal. She was able to outwork Carnelossi very easily despite the slight drop-off. And, I don't know how much. I don't know if I agree with the cut stoppage, but
no, that cut stoppage was very much a woman's MMA cut stoppage. Oh, one of these girls is hurt. We'd better get them out of here. I mean, Carnelossi probably was not about to win that fight.
No.
So I'm not I'm not really huge on arguing over it, but we have seen it is so rare to see a fight actually stopped for a cut in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a question of oh, well, if it's bleeding into the eye or something like that. No, I have seen countless fighters with their eyebrows split wide open fight multiple rounds after, and it's not boxing. There's very much a real sense that a fighter who has a cut over their eye can do other things besides punch and get punched in the face.
Yeah.
They can go to the ground, they can wrestle, they can grapple, they can change the dynamic of a fight so that the cut isn't the big determining factor.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was maybe the doctors down there are more used to working on boxers, where you see a cut like that in boxing and you're probably stopping the fight.
Yeah. In MMA, a cut needs to be labeled more of a gash than it does a cut in order to stop the fight. But Hill looked great. I liked what I saw out of Carnelossi as well. She looked like a poor man's or poor woman's, however you want to put it, version of Jessica Andrade. She just bulls forward with her bulky frame, looking to land power shots. Looks like she could be a fun addition.
Well, the nice thing for her, I think, that gives me some hope, and was what I liked seeing out of her on tape, is that not only is she powerful and willfully aggressive, but she can keep a shockingly good pace for how bricked up she is.
Yeah, her pace didn't seem to fade. It wasn't as intense as Hill's early, but her pace did not slow at all.
Yeah, she threw 69 significant strikes in the first round, 76 in the second round, and 41 in the third before the fight got stopped.
And that was in about 2 minutes, so she was actually upping her pace.
Yep. So, she may not be the most technically pretty boxer out there, but if she can just kind of, if she's willing to constantly wade forward and throw with power at that kind of pace, she could be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The technique can come. She's pretty early in her career, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. No, I think that was her first loss since her debut too.
Yep. It was a good performance from her. She showed up. I think it's honestly it's a more impressive performance from Hill. It was a more poised, more consistent striking performance than I've seen out of Hill in a while. It felt like a much better win to me than her win over Jodie Esquibel, who I think is not as good a fighter as Ariane Carnelossi.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Hill looked better here than she did against Esquibel, and Carnelossi is definitely better than Esquibel. Yeah.
That brings us to a flyweight bout. Sergio Pettis, Tyson Nam, and this was just always going to be a really rough matchup for Tyson Nam, honestly.
Yeah, watching it, I felt like this is the most Sergio Pettis performance that Sergio Pettis has ever put on.
I mean, it's this, and it's his fight against Brandon Moreno that he had, where he really just tuned Moreno up for the whole fight.
Mm-hmm.
But
and he did the same thing here.
Who doesn't have the footwork to close him off at this point in his career, where he's developed, he's a tough guy to beat.
Oh, absolutely. No, Pettis, it amazes me that him and his brother come from the same mother, so to speak, because they're completely different. Sergio is a technical machine, whereas Sergio's a technical machine, and Anthony is just a knockout artist who has been able to get away without exquisite technique, to be brutally honest with you.
Yeah.
But it was what we've come to expect out of Pettis at this point. He continued to take sharp angles throughout the contest. Picked him apart with a variety of strikes, kicks, punches, worked some on the body. It was a complete performance, so to speak. Well, a complete striking performance.
Yeah. And it's what's nice to see in these performances he's had lately that are like this is that when he's got a good command of distance, his defense is super tight.
Yeah.
Nam is out there swinging these hard hooks over and over, and Pettis, almost all of them, is either just slipping out of the way a little bit or his forearms are just right there to block him.
Yeah.
And he can do that for every minute of every round without having some major defensive lapse, which was kind of the problem early in his career where he would just get he'd get a little complacent. He'd watch his own work a little bit. He'd throw a 1-2 and he'd kind of hang on the end of that 2. And now he doesn't do any of that at all.
Yeah, I think that he used to try to force a little bit more of a finish, looking for a finish early in his career because, he was Anthony's little brother.
Yeah.
And I think at this point he's completely comfortable with who he is. I believe this was his 9th victory in the UFC, and every single one of them has gone to decision.
Yep. He's never going to be a power striker. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah,
go ahead.
You got to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit disappointed with Nam. Like when he bum rushed Pettis at the end of the first, it looked like he could have done some damage, but Pettis was saved by the bell. And so I was hoping that Nam would come out a little bit more aggressive in that manner, but again, he looked to counter with those heavy hooks some more, and it wasn't working for him. So I was hoping he'd change it up, and he never did.
Yeah, well, and you go back through Tyson Nam's career, and he's got some great highlights. He sets up some great power shots in fights, but they're almost all, not all. He's had some great early finishes, but most of his great highlights they come through fights where he's fighting at a pretty slow pace and just kind of slowly setting things up, slowly pressuring, slowly getting his opponent to tire out, get a little bit sloppy, break down a little bit, and then open up the opportunity for something really vicious to land. And if you have somebody like Pettis who's just always going to stay tight and controlled and in shape and not wear out, it's just not going to come.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying I was hoping that he would go more for the bum rushes, but he didn't. But I still think that there's definitely fights he can win in the flyweight division as they slowly rebuild it. So
there aren't very many flyweights in that division who actually fight long all the time.
True.
These are mostly really short-armed dudes who are used to fighting in the pocket and having thrilling fights inside and scrambling all over the place. So,
yeah,
Tyson Nam's pressure power punching game can definitely find purchase in that.
Yeah, and he's huge for flyweight.
Yeah, he is. Brings us to Paul Craig and his bonus winning performance over Vinicius Moreira. And, all credit to Paul Craig. I kind of thought that if Moreira got him down, he would be able to figure out how to out-grapple him and sub him. He seemed like the more positionally controlled grappler in his fights when he's won.
Yes.
But he's just... the athleticism isn't there to make it work at this level.
Oh, no. No, and
Craig may be wild and unstructured at times. He's pathologically aggressive at all times, but he was just too fast, and even he was too strong for Moreira. Moreira ended up pulling guard. I love Craig's post-fight interview where he's like, "I'm the only person I've ever seen pull guard. I had no idea what to do when he pulled guard."
Yeah, Paul Craig's a hell of a personality, first of all.
Yeah.
This was one of those contests on the card that I actually felt really confident in picking when I said that Craig was going to win it, just because of that, like you talked about, his pathological aggression. Yeah. I mean, Moreira's other opponents had no problem swarming him. I figured Craig would be able to do the same thing because Craig's not as good of an athlete as he thinks he is.
Yeah.
But the fact that he thinks he is meant that he was going to go after Moreira. So
yeah. Just kind of surprised me at the end of the day. I think that was all it took, is just the willingness to go after him, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally could see where you were coming from. I think that when it comes to pure positional grappling technique, Moreira is definitely a better jiu-jitsu practitioner than Craig, but even on the ground, you know, Craig's willing to go for crazy stuff. I mean, that's how he beat Ankalaev, you know? He goes for it.
Yeah, the Ankalaev thing, though, is that's the kind of, and I know Craig has made a habit out of these kinds of miracles, but that is kind of miracle that, like, I would never bet on Paul Craig because of that win over Magomed Ankalaev.
Oh, hell no, I never would either. I'm totally there, but just the fact he goes for the win.
Yes. And
with Moreira, the win is there to be taken more often than it is with others.
Yeah, it's very true. I just kind of thought that maybe this would be the chance for Moreira to really show up on the ground and kind of, you know, put proof to his black belt, because I'm pretty sure he's a jiu-jitsu black belt of.
So as soon as this fight was over, a thought entered my head. And at this point, I really want to see what sort of ridiculousness Paul Craig could produce with John Vellante.
John Vellante, yeah. If Vellante is going to be healthy anytime soon, I am all for that. At the moment, he's injured, but I don't...
Still. I mean, something weird always seems to happen in Vellante's fights. Something weird always seems to happen in Craig's fights. I mean, bearing it's not the type of weirdness we got in tonight's main event, I am all for seeing whatever the hell that'll produce.
Yeah. I personally, since Vellante is injured, because that is actually right where my head went as well. I'm thinking he should face off against the winner of Ed Herman versus Gadzhimurad Antigulov.
Okay, I could see that.
Because Herman's a ton of fun. And
do you think that the winner would get on the UFC video game?
Oh, poor Ed. He's never getting that game spot. You know, it's going to be one of those things too, where Dana White's just like, oh, maybe if you win this next fight, you'll get that UFC spot on the UFC video game, and then he'll win and be like, oh, well, I know you wanted it, but actually the guy right before you, he wasn't on the game either, and he wanted it too, and we gave him your spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Next time.
You've been around since 2006, Ed, so, he's going to be around longer. They're just going to keep dangling that carrot.
Yeah. No. Poor Ed. That brings us to a women's bantamweight bout. Bethe Correia, Sahara Eubanks, or Sajara Eubanks, and I cannot be more pleased about getting this fight wrong. I just figured at some point, Eubanks, like the first round, she came out, she took Bethe down, she beat the tar out of her. Could possibly have argued she got a 10-8 round that round. And, it just felt like that athletic discrepancy would show up at key moments all fight. But Bethe looked good, and she turned that whole thing around for a win.
Oh, yeah. No, she looked loads better than what she did in her previous contest. Who was it was it Aldana that she lost to last time?
Yeah, she came, and I honestly thought she beat Aldana for most of that fight, and then she went for a terrible takedown and got immediately finished.
That's right. Yeah, but she looked loads better this time. She looked like she was in good shape, because she was the one that was still going strong in the final two rounds after Eubanks faded. And, it's unfortunate that Correia is more or less seen like a joke in so many MMA circles.
Connor and I were talking about this. I cannot believe that being mean to Ronda Rousey was the thing that made Bethe Correia forever hated.
If she had done it a year or two later, she would totally be lauded, but whatever.
Exactly. Talk about your bad timing.
Yeah. But, I have to admit that this win for her made me realize just how much I missed her victory dances. I mean, good hell, those are awesome. It makes me feel like I shouldn't have any shame when I go dancing in public, so.
You still should, but I understand where you're coming from.
Frustrating loss for Eubanks, though. I mean,
yeah, no, this is somebody who was she was supposed to be a title contender. And
yeah, less than a year ago, she was scheduled to headline the UFC New York card.
Yep.
Oh.
And now she's, losing back-to-back fights against Aspen Ladd and Bethe Correia. And, I mean, the wild thing is that I would argue that both of those very easily could or should have been draws. Yeah. Or that Eubanks actually beat Aspen Ladd, frankly. But it's really clear that her cardio and her inability to pressure are huge problems for her. Because it's not just the cardio. Like, her cardio, it may be great in training because she's always getting to be on the front foot. She's always getting to have a sparring partner who gives her room and, won't back her down all the time. But in fights against Aspen Ladd, against Bethe Correia, they just kept on her and kept her backing up, and she's clearly not comfortable and happy doing it.
No, she's not. And, the other part that was disappointing about it was after she found success with it in the opening round, she basically abandoned the ground game. I think she went for one takedown in the last 2 rounds. I could be remembering wrong, but
let me see the stats here. I've got them right in front of me. She attempted 5 takedowns overall. She actually attempted 3 in the second round and hit none of them. And then 1 in the final round. I think a lot of it is honestly a credit to Correia, who, I've been talking about this with Connor. I think she actually she works hard to scout her opponents. She works hard to get comfortable in the fight and learn as the fight goes on. It's just, and it paid off great. She, after a bad first round, she turned around and saw what Eubanks was doing and just outworked her and and won the fight down the stretch. Yeah. But it's always just walking the knife edge, the razor edge for her between just barely outworking somebody and absolutely getting crushed by one big shot or one bad moment.
Yeah. Well, Correia is the poster child for what confidence can do for you, because even after she was smashed by Rousey and she's had some other really close calls or something like that, you never hear a report of her being down on herself or anything like that. Every time she comes out to the cage, she's dancing, singing, happy. She just has inane confidence in herself, almost to the point where I wonder if she's aware of her own limitations. I mean, whether she is or isn't, she's exceeding expectations, and all the more credit to her. She should be like an ultimate underdog story that people love, but because of her timing with her Ronda feud,
Yeah. Oh, well, it was a great win for her. It keeps her right in the thick of that division where she's, just because she plans well and she works hard, she's going to be a problem for people. It's not a division where you have to have an especially complicated arsenal to find some success. So,
and in the process, because if she had lost, there's a possibility that she could have been cut. But sure. I'm happy to see her stick around.
Yep. That brings us finally opening bout of the card. Claudio Puelles, Marcos Rosa Mariano, and man, did the UFC scrape the bottom of the barrel when they brought Mariano in to fight on one of those random fight cards of the past. I can't even remember which one it was that he debuted on. Let me see. It was.
I don't remember. It was against Lando Venata. I do remember that.
Yeah, he debuted against Lando Venata, which is a terrible terrible disservice.
Yes.
At UFC 234, that snake bit Adesanya versus Silva card, and it was sort of like they were hiring one of Anderson Silva's training partners to, I don't know, throw a bone to Anderson Silva or something. But
Well,
He
he's terrible.
He got terribly outclassed by, we talk about Carlos Joaquin, like a more raw fighter off the Peruvian MMA circuit.
Yeah. No, Puelles has potential. He totally does, but he should not be dominating anybody in the UFC the way that he did tonight. That it's ridiculous, Like, I'm convinced that Mariano was only signed because in some sort of contract negotiation, Anderson said, "Okay, well, you got to bring him in," and they said, "Sure, whatever." And I just, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Puelles outlanded him 22-2 in significant strikes, 101-5 in total strikes, landed 4 of 6 takedowns, had 2 submission attempts, and had 7 passes.
Do you think CM Punk could have beat Mariano? Seriously?
No, but that only tells you everything you need to know about CM Punk. CM Punk made Mike Jackson look like John Jones.
True, but I mean, it's just, I can at least understand where CM Punk can bring in buys. I don't get what the hell Mariano does for anybody, but okay.
Well, he got Claudio Puelles a win.
Because that's high on the priority list, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, back to the main event real quick. Yair Rodriguez, eye-poking Jeremy Stephens. Just a bummer of a way for this card to go. Like I said, talking all the way down through it, it's not like these were all bad fights or we didn't have stuff to talk about. There are all sorts of nuances and little things to draw out of this card.
Yeah.
But they're all nuances and little things. Yair versus Stephens was supposed to be the big thing, and we didn't get to see it. So hopefully the UFC can rebook that sometime soon, and we can watch that bout in the near future and get that little bit of closure.
Yes.
In the meantime, thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at @TheZaneSimon. You can find Dayne on Twitter at @TheDaneFox. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give us a like and subscribe to our podcast feed, Bloody Elbow Presents, over on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all those things. Watch out for all our other shows, Pull No Punches, Mookie Crookie Show, Level Change Podcast, the MMA Vivisection, of course, all that. I'll be back next week for UFC Fight Night, Hermanson versus Cannonier, where I believe I will be once again joined by Eddie Mercado, but no guarantees. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.